Here are two deep dives generated by Google Notebook LM on my two posts concerning serene passages and vivacious passages from Beethoven's concertos and symphonies. Here is the first one.
Right. So we're back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, we'd love to dig into these composers and really figure out, like, how their music ticks. And today it's Beethoven again.
Always a good choice.
Yeah. Never a bad time to revisit Beethoven, right?
Yeah.
But this time we're going to be looking at something a little bit different, something I'm really excited about, those serene and reflective passages, like we've done with his sonatas and quartets.
Right.
And, you know, we keep finding these beautiful moments, and we've been kind of like, oh man, are there similar things in like his big orchestral works?
Yeah.
You know?
The concertos and symphonies. Yeah.
Exactly. And thankfully, once again, our friend Kai-Fong Lee, you know, that amazing YouTube channel he's got.
Oh yeah.
He's put together a really beautiful selection of some of those serene moments from Beethoven's concertos and symphonies. So we've got those to kind of work with as our source material today.
Fantastic. So where should we start?
Well, I think it would be interesting because, you know, we've got this whole scope of Beethoven's career to work with, right? But he didn't write any concertos in his late period.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think maybe what we do is we look at three pieces, something from his early period, something from his middle, and then we'll end with something from his late period from the symphonies.
Sounds good. A nice little journey through his life.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with early Beethoven. And I think that the second movement of the piano concerto, number 1 in C major, is just a perfect example of that early serenity.
Okay.
It was composed in 1795. He was so young. Can you imagine?
Yeah, 24 years old. I mean, really just figuring things out.
Unbelievable. I know, and yet there's already this sense of tranquility in the music.
Absolutely.
What do you hear in this movement that really speaks to you about that serenity?
Well, it's almost like I don't know, there's a youthful kind of directness to the emotion. I think, you know, the second movement, it unfolds with this really simple kind of stepwise melody. You know, it's often carried by the piano, and the harmonic progressions are so gentle, and they really create this feeling of kind of peaceful contemplation.
It is peaceful.
Almost like, you know, you're having a quiet conversation with somebody.
It's not as, I don't know how to put it. It's not as heavy or as...
Yeah, it doesn't have that same weight as the later work.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a different kind of serenity. It's like a, I don't know.
A youthful reflection.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Youthful reflection. I love that. So then we move into Beethoven's middle period, and here we've got the second movement of the violin concerto in G major.
Oh, yes.
Which was composed around 1806. And I have to share this back because I just find it so fascinating. This piece, this concerto, which is now so incredibly beloved.
Right. Everyone knows it.
I know everyone knows it. It was basically ignored for decades.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't until 1844 that it was really revived, and it kind of gained the popularity that it has today. It's amazing.
Wow. So what happened there?
I know, right? It's a mystery. But so let's talk about the serene quality of this movement. Well, why do you think it had that quality? And maybe we can speculate on why it might have been overlooked.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that's so captivating about this movement is that sustained ethereal kind of melody that the solo violin gets. You know, it's like these long, arching phrases that just kind of float above this really hushed accompaniment from the orchestra, especially the strings. And that creates this atmosphere that's just so timeless and so peaceful. And maybe it was just a matter of changing tastes. You know, musical styles were evolving, or maybe it was something about the way it was performed back then. We can't really know for sure, but it's just so interesting to think about how a piece of music can kind of be lost and then found again, you know.
It really highlights how our understanding of these composers can shift so much over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing. So for our final stop on this serene Beethoven journey, we're going to jump to his late period, and we're going to look at the third movement of Symphony Number 9 in D minor.
Okay.
The big one, the choral symphony, you know.
Of course.
Which he finished between 1822 and 1824.
Right.
And, I mean, this is a monumental piece of music. And, you know, this particular movement, this third movement, it offers a different kind of serenity, I think, you know, compared to what we've heard so far.
Yeah.
This is like late Beethoven's serenity. It's got all the depth and the wisdom of his later years kind of baked into it.
I see what you mean.
How would you compare the serenity in this movement to the serenity we've already talked about?
Okay, well, so this movement, the Adagio molto e cantabile, has a much more, I guess you could say, profound sense of inner peace. You know, it's not just a youthful kind of reflection like in the piano concerto, or even just that lyrical beauty of the violin concerto. This is something deeper. It's like, you know, these long, broadly unfolding melodic lines, they create this feeling of spaciousness and almost like spiritual contemplation, you know, and the tempo is much slower, and you've got this incredible interplay between the string instruments and the wind instruments that all just contributes to this profound sense of calm. And I think that's the key word here. It's calm. It's like a serenity that's been earned,
Yeah.
you know, after a lifetime of really intense, you know, musical and personal struggle.
Wow, yeah, that's beautifully put. So we've covered a lot of ground here today. We've gone from early Beethoven to late Beethoven.
Yeah.
And we've explored three really distinct facets of serenity in his music.
Yeah.
You know, that youthful introspection of the Piano Concerto Number 1,
Right.
the rediscovered beauty of the Violin Concerto, and then finally the profound peace of the Ninth Symphony. It's really quite a journey.
It is, and it makes you think, you know, especially considering that the Violin Concerto was kind of lost for a while and then rediscovered. What does that say about how we understand music, how it changes over time, and are there other pieces out there just waiting to be rediscovered? You know, what other treasures are hidden away in musical history?
It's a great question,
Yeah.
and something for all of us to ponder. You know, what are we missing out on, and how can we be more open to discovering those hidden gems? So I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you,
It's been a pleasure.
as always.
Now the second deep dive.
Ever get that feeling like you want to cut to the chase, like you want to get right to the good stuff?
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing here. You know, we're going to dive deep into the heart of some music.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're looking for is what gives certain pieces of music that extra oomph, that extra energy,
Yeah, that special something.
that special something, yeah. And to really get a feel for it, we're going to be looking at three movements from Beethoven.
Yeah, 3 very carefully picked movements.
Exactly. And so, you know, Beethoven had this amazing career. And we've got these 3 movements to really sort of span that whole career and see what was going on.
A little taste of each period, you could say.
Yeah, exactly. So like a little listening tour through Beethoven's work.
That's a great way to put it.
And the goal is to really feel that vivaciousness, you know, that energy. And where are we going to find these great examples?
Well, we're turning to a fantastic YouTube channel, Kai Fong Lee. He does some amazing work, picking out these amazing moments in music, really insightful stuff.
Yeah. And so we're going to be checking out some of his picks. All right, so where should we jump in?
Well, let's start right at the beginning, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll go with the youthful energy of the early period. So we're going to be listening to the 3rd movement of Beethoven's Piano Concerto Number 1 in C major.
Okay. The Piano Concerto Number 1.
Yeah.
And he was pretty young when he wrote this, right?
Oh, yeah, he was only about 24 years old.
24. Wow. So what should we listen for in terms of that vivacious feeling? Like what is it about this piece?
Well, even in his early work, you can already hear that drive that Beethoven is so famous for. You know, he's still writing in a very classical style, but there's this real sense of forward motion, especially in that main theme. And you hear it in the tempo, of course, but also in the way the piano and the orchestra are just tossing these musical ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
It's like a conversation.
Yeah, it's got like a playfulness to it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, a real playfulness.
So that's the early period. So let's skip ahead a little bit to the middle period.
Right.
And for this one, we're going to check out the 3rd movement of the Violin Concerto in D major.
Okay.
Now, this is the period where his music starts to get a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more heroic. So how does that vivaciousness kind of change in this piece?
That's a great question. You know, in the violin concerto, I think that energy, it feels bigger somehow, more expansive, and maybe even a little more insistent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, you'll hear these really intricate rhythms, especially between the violin and the orchestra.
Yeah.
And there's this sense of buildup and release, which creates a more powerful feeling of, you know, of vibrancy.
Right.
Like, think about those contrasting sections. You know, you have these really lyrical parts, and then bam, you get hit with this huge rhythmic punch.
It's like wham, bam, thank you.
And exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's the middle period. Now, here's the thing. Beethoven didn't actually write any concertos in his late period.
That's right. So to get a sense of that kind of late Beethoven energy, we're going to switch gears a little bit and check out the 2nd movement of his Symphony Number 9.
Okay, so a symphony now.
A symphony, yeah. Big difference.
Huge difference.
So how does that lively feeling work in something as massive as a symphony?
It's interesting, right? Because in the Ninth Symphony, it's not really about, you know, a soloist showing off their skills.
Mm.
You know, you hear the energy in these driving rhythms that just get passed around the orchestra, you know, from the strings to the brass to the woodwinds.
Like a relay race.
It is like a relay race. And then you also have these really sudden changes in volume.
Yeah.
You know, going from super quiet to like incredibly loud and just a heartbeat.
Wow.
And that just injects this incredible excitement into the music.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of vibrancy for sure. Maybe more about like raw power and the way he uses those rhythms.
Right. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We started with that early piano concerto. You know, we heard that youthful energy. We moved on to the violin concerto. We heard things get a little more dramatic, a little more powerful.
And then we finished with that symphonic blast.
Yeah, that symphonic blast. And what's really cool is that we were able to hear how this idea of, you know, vivaciousness, you know, it's not just one thing. It changes and evolves depending on, you know, what kind of music Beethoven was writing and, you know, what stage of his life he was at.
And thanks to Kai-Fang Lee, we got to really hear that, how this quality, it can adapt to you know, these different forms, these different musical forms, and how it shows up in, you know, in different parts of his career.
Absolutely. So here's a little something to think about. When you listen to these pieces, how do you hear Beethoven's way of expressing that energy, that vibrancy? Does it change? Does it stay the same? Maybe give these movements a full listen and see what you think.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, great place to start.
All right, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.